Terms of Service by Michael James Scharen. Copyright 2022. Matthew, or Matt Fielding, had always felt left out or behind at times. As a teenager, he was not alone in this, though, as all teenagers did, he felt such problems were unique to him. He had a good home life with caring parents concerned with his academic, social, and physical needs. They did not spoil their only son, however. They still had some old-fashioned ideas about children not being overly coddled. Emily and Joshua Fielding were definitely not helicopter parents, hovering to forestall any scrapes or disappointments in their child's lives. For them, each of their children was encouraged to develop as much as social engineers would allow into unique, caring, critical thinking individuals. Nonetheless, there had been some resentment building over the last 6 months toward the decision by Emily and Joshua to delay any new enhancements to their son's augmentation implant, or Augie, as they had become known. The dreams of Ray Kurzweil and Elon Musk had come close to full fruition in the last 20 years. Developments and advancements for the seamless nerve-to-chip interface have been racing ahead faster than anyone realized. The implants worked along similar lines to those initially used to restore eyesight or hearing. That technology was at least 5 generations old. Though there were many late-night discussions and arguments, these loving parents felt they had to bend to the competitive and social pressures, at least enough to ensure their children's futures. Though they felt secure enough not to succumb on their own, they knew that Matt and his sisters would easily become de facto second-class persons without some compromises. Though generally not spoken of, compliancy ratings as an outgrowth of credit reporting and social media mining were already a fact of life. Just 2 years earlier, both West Point and Annapolis began accepting cadets with neural enhancements, as the military referred to them. Ahead of the curve, Colorado Springs had been on board for 5 years now. The powers that be knew that other countries were rapidly adopting the procedure, as controls over human experimentation were either ignored or non-existent. In the words of one congressman, all the kids are doing it. This is not to say that such research had not been carried out all those years in full force under black projects within the United States. The media was exceptionally cooperative in not reporting it. All that being said, Joshua and Emily were cognizant that unless their children had some leg up, they would be playing on a decidedly uneven field. After another late-night round, Joshua said, "Emily, dear, you know that Matt is very intelligent, even without the technology, but we have to face facts. If we don't get him extra RAM and new software, other kids will be running circles around him. He's already sensitive enough, but he doesn't need that kind of aggravation. Frankly, as smart as he is, I don't think he could compete against the students with 16 processors and 256 gigabytes of RAM." Emily was always the one who needed just that much more convincing. She said, "Very well, Josh, I suppose the upgrades won't really change him. It's still up to him how he uses it. Let's schedule a procedure in the next couple of weeks before school starts so he can be more acclimated before then." Joshua answered, "I don't like this any more than you do, honey, but his future really is at stake. Do you think we should schedule the girls and get this over with all at once?" Emily was truly frazzled by this time and with this subject. She said, "No, no, they are still too young and I don't want to push them any more than necessary. Emma only received her Augie 3 months ago with plenty of RAM. Even that was against my better judgment. They may have dropped the age from 16 to 14, but it still is up to us whether or not they're enhanced in the first place. Let's hold off." The next morning, when Matt came down to breakfast, Joshua said, "Matthew, we know you've been very patient with us regarding the additional RAM. Since you received your Augie after your 16th birthday, you've shown us that you're indeed a responsible young man with respect to such a powerful enhancement. Matt was looking hopeful. Dad, does that mean that you and Mom will take me to get the next level of RAM, maybe even an update? Matt's mother still looked uneasy, but continued where Joshua left off. Son, not only did we decide to increase your RAM, but we will also go in early for the next 8 processor cores. Matthew did not know what to say right away. He had been angry and stewing for weeks over their foot dragging. What is more, he knew that he had not hidden that anger well. He never could conceal such feelings from his parents. The son was grinning from ear to ear and doing everything he could not to shout with joy. Josh Fielding knew his son, so he took this opening. Matt, your mother and I know you have been extremely prudent with your Augie, but this raises the stakes. With great power comes great responsibility, as you've heard me drone on your entire life. You must let us know immediately if anyone approaches you regarding Contra Code, right? This brought Matt down to earth. He had seen them in the media and was pretty sure he had noticed them at the shopping center or in their cars on the way to school. The slang term from them was betas, which alluded to beta testers. The software companies, as always, needed to test their new releases with willing participants. There were always early adopters out there wanting the latest and greatest. It was unknown how long development of extensions had been underway. Many were suspicious over the implant manufacturers releasing software development kits, SDKs, so soon before limited approval of third-party apps by the FDA. The FDA had barely approved clinical trials and debugging of the new head apps, or happs as they were known on the street. These originated with third-party companies thought to be legitimate developers for the aftermarket. The hackers had been around since Steve Jobs was selling blue boxes in college to cheat the only government-sponsored monopoly besides Major League Baseball, and that was Ma Bell. All kinds of nefarious plugins could be found on the so-called black market. The hacker software claimed to do anything from magnify emotions or human senses to cheating at blackjack to enhancing negotiating skills for that next big raise. The sky was the limit since all neural inputs to the various processing centers in the brain were accessible. There was talk of releasing nanoprocessors for distribution throughout the body. These would seek out nerve tissue and bind with it. Tennis players, golfers, and other professional athletes were already salivating at the thought of beefing up their muscle memory and response directly from local nerves, providing a learned and repeatable stimulus. Getting ready for school, Matt assured his parents, hey, I'm 17 years old. I see the reports, and I've even observed a few things that I never told you about. I don't want to be one of those betas or code junkies who don't know they're screwing up their lives with these apps floating around. No one has ever approached me, and if they do, I'll tell them to go pound sand. Matt's parents did their best to hide any concerns they still felt about this brave new tech world they were sending their children into. Emily smiled, hugged her son tightly, and escorted him to the door. She said, we have every confidence in you, Matthew. Over the next 6 months, some of the major software companies had gained approval for a handful of basic neural assist applications, just as the first killer app for the personal computer turned out to be the Lotus 123 spreadsheet. These companies were looking to the next big thing. Mobile smartphones had all but been replaced, just as cellular phones had squeezed out landlines. Matthew said, Dad, I'm happy in being able to work complicated calculus problems in my head or to ring up my buddies for a bit of street hockey, even with my hands full of groceries. When are you going to break down and get an implant? Surely it would help you a lot in your work. I've noticed no ill effects in all this time, and freeing up my brain only seems to make things easier. Joshua couldn't think of any reasons to counter Matt's logic. Son, you may be right. Maybe I'm acting like an old stick in the mud. As an aerospace engineer, I could use all the help I can get. We've got all the latest design tools, but these whippersnappers coming out of college these days are starting to eat my lunch. Much of the experience we senior engineers had in our brains can all be downloaded by anyone. I will say this, however, and that is experience still matters. Personal experience is the only thing that cannot be transferred without a loss of context, emotional reaction, and the one on one interaction in solving problems that shapes our thinking. On Friday evening, Joshua did not come home for dinner. He only rolled in around 9:30 p.m. It was a good thing that his car knew the way home. He was very quiet when he came in, but the whole family was there awaiting his arrival. Hello, family, he said with a fake smile on his face. Everyone knew something was terribly wrong. His words were slurred slightly, and they could tell he had been drinking. This is not like the husband and father they knew. My son is a prophet, he announced. Emily was somewhat in shock, with a good bit of fear mixed in. Matt's sisters, Lacey and Beth, were silent, just staring. It was up to Matt. Dad, please have a seat and explain, slowly, what you were talking about. What is it you want to tell us? Well known as the caring family man, he looked as if he were about to cry, but mustered up his courage. My boss, Larry, took me into a conference room this afternoon. He informed me that I was not going to get the promotion he had been hinting at for months. Not only that, but they are going to give the position to Patel, who will now be my boss. He is at least 6 years behind me and has way less practical experience. He worked under me, and now I work under him. Everyone was stunned. This promotion was in the bag for as long as anyone knew. Lacey was nearly in tears now. She hated to see her father treated like this. But why, Daddy? Larry has been here for dinner several times and dropping hints all over the place. Joshua said, Honey, it won't be so terrible. It will just take me a little longer than the others. They need me pretty badly for this new hyperliner if they wanted to get up to Mach 8. There are plenty of things that others don't know that cannot be downloaded into their brains. I still consider Larry a friend, but even he has people he must report to. Patel has been on fire lately, and several of the top dogs have taken notice. It doesn't matter to them that he's been loading up on apps for his Augie. Some of them he wrote himself at home, and who knows if there's been any debugging. After the kids had gone to bed, Emily and Joshua were readying themselves. Now that they were in their own room, they could speak more openly. Emily asked, Josh, what did you mean when you said that Matthew was a prophet? Joshua was brushing his teeth, so he had to wait for an answer. Oh, that, he said. Not long ago, Matt asked me why I had not gone ahead with an implant, since it would help me so much with my work. I did not have a good answer for him, but now I finally do. I know you're upset now, but think about what you're saying. Are you seriously considering getting an Augie lodged into that thick skull of yours? Her husband was still slightly tipsy, but had regained most of his faculties. Joshua looked dead serious. How can I not? Neither of us have implants, and how does that look to our children? We never forced them to do it in the first place. Though their teachers, our bosses, and our friends all urge us on. Look what happened to me today. Is that what we want for Matt and the girls? Matthew seems perfectly happy and healthy. He handles the whole thing in a very mature, pragmatic fashion. I can only hope to be so well adjusted. Emily listened carefully to what her husband was saying. Are you going to go through with it then? Maybe Matt is right about how it could aid you in your work. My work, on the other hand, could be seriously hindered by trying to analyze everything to the maximum. As a nurse, I have to use my instincts as well as my training. Most of the surgeons have had the procedure, but they don't see nearly as much as of the patients as I do. They acted like robots before these things became so popular. It helps them as it could help you. I have to use my personal skills, but then so do you. Who goes and talks to the test pilots when they're feeling jittery? They're all so macho, even the women, that they cannot be seen showing any fear. But they know to come and talk to you when something bothers them. That's not in any book or database. 2 days later, Joshua informed Matthew and his sisters that he was going to go ahead with the procedure. Maybe I'm just too old fashioned. I should embrace what engineers like myself and scientists have come up with to improve our lives. It is time to put my money where my mouth is. Matt smiled and said, "Just remember, Dad," as Lacey, Beth, and Emily harmonized with him. With great power comes great responsibility. The kids and Emily all understood his trepidation and wanted the father and husband to know he had their support. Several months went by, and Joshua was feeling much more confident in his work. There had been nothing but good reports. At the same time, Matt was noticing more and more betas and code junkies than he had ever seen before. They all had that 1,000-yard stare. The new apps were beginning to flood the market along with what the street coders were coming up with. No one could say who was doing the most good or the most damage. The movers and shakers in the social media business were not sitting around on their hands. They wanted in. Getting advertising sent straight into people's brain pans was just too good to be true. For years, they had been doing psychometric testing on individuals, along with voluntary and involuntary focus groups. Common Core was just the tip of the spear. Data mining was only the pinnacle of the great iceberg of cash. Why should the government have all the fun experimenting on unsuspecting souls, or sifting through the live streams of their daily communications, or creating dossiers of their personal and business contacts and their contacts? A calm had come over the Fielding household, and Joshua was more relaxed these days, more secure in his job and his future. Patel was even more of a prima donna now that he had this new position over him. Joshua shrugged it off, knowing that there were many things he knew that Patel was too arrogant to acknowledge. Matthew came home one Tuesday afternoon after school and found his dad sitting by himself in his study, just staring out the window. He had been crying, but saw Matthew come in. "Johnny Ferreira is dead," was all he could muster. "Dad? What? Johnny? How? When?" Joshua stifled another tear and said, "It happened this morning. The plane broke up in the air at precisely 11:18:22 a.m., and it's all my fault." Matthew said, "Dad, don't say that. I know you love Johnny like I did. You would never put him in danger. He's been here many times, and I know you were great friends. Something must have gone wrong that neither of you could ever see coming." His father was still in great shock. "Son, I know that you mean the best and that you love Johnny as much as I did. That is what makes it even more tragic. If I had only gotten my implant early on, this never would have happened. We let you kids go ahead with something that your mother and I were both too afraid to do ourselves. Now I am paying the price. You were wise to advise me to get this procedure. If I had only done it earlier, Patel would not be calling the shots, and Johnny would still be alive." Matt knew there was nothing he could do but sit there with his father and support him. Maybe his dad would want to talk it out, or maybe they should just sit there and keep each other company. He was in mourning too. He went into the kitchen to get some coffee for the both of them. Matt didn't drink coffee yet, but really it was just a gesture. When he returned, his father's posture had relaxed somewhat, though he was still staring out the window at their beautiful view of the desert. Then Joshua spoke. You know, Johnny had told me more than once he did not want to be picked for this flight. He felt there were more engineering details that needed to be worked out before anyone took her up. Matt was listening intently. Did you agree with him? Did you feel it wasn't safe or that something could go wrong? Joshua sat silent for a moment before he spoke again. You know, the day Patel got that promotion, your mother pointed out something that I had never considered before. She knew that the pilots always came to me if they were disturbed about the program or some aspect of it, and I always listened, and my bosses then listened to me. I wasn't aware of that, Dad, Matt said. Was this a regular occurrence? Joshua looked at his son and said, You could say that, but I never considered it much. That is the way it's supposed to work. The pilots have the final say, but Patel wouldn't have it. I don't think Johnny would blame me, but I should have gone above Patel's head like he always went above mine. Matt guessed that getting his father to discuss the technical details might get him back on track or distract him from his pain, if only briefly. Besides, he needed to know, Dad, what, specifically, was Johnny concerned about? Joshua had gone over it 1,000 times inside his mind, or as Augie did. You know, we're trying to really push the envelope for this new hypersonic airliner, right? You're always asking me questions even I have difficulty answering. Well, this is straightforward. As at the speeds we are talking about, every bit of drag has to be eliminated if it is not absolutely necessary. The pilots hated it, but we finally convinced them to get rid of the old-time, forward-looking glassed-in cockpit. The aerodynamics demands it, and we can accommodate them without the glass by using the cameras. Well, they feel boxed in and claustrophobic. Even in the old airliners, there were no ejection seats, but the view makes them feel they have more control. Matt said, Okay, Dad, I get all of that, but Johnny was pretty open-minded. That would never slow him down. His father smiled as he thought of his friend. To be sure, son, that wasn't it. But we also had quite a bit of diagnostic equipment crammed into that cockpit, which neither he nor I felt was necessary. It did not match real-world operating parameters. That space needs to be open with nothing blocking movement or any indicators. I repeatedly took this to Patel, but he is a numbers man. He has no feel for flying, even though he is an aeronautical engineer with some standing. He wanted to impress the bosses with more presentation slides. Matt was tearing up as he looked at his father and asked, Is that what happened, Dad? Something went wrong, and that junk was in the way? Joshua fought back more sobs while he answered, That's right. I heard him screaming over the comlink that he couldn't move an oscilloscope or some damn thing. She started to shimmy, and he couldn't bring her back under control. That Boeing fly-by-wire system we installed was junk. That was Patel's decision as well. The computer jammed on the power where that never should have happened, and our prized prototype airliner disintegrated at Mach 6.6. Then they both broke into tears as father and son hugged each other, sharing each other's pain. After the funeral, Matt felt that his family had resigned themselves to creating some sense of normalcy, whether it really existed or not. Joshua was very businesslike, but he did not spend 1 hour more at the plant or out at the flight line that was absolutely necessary. He avoided Patel like the plague, with the excuse that prior to the inquest, he would not provide any reasons to be accused of collaborating with anyone regarding his testimony. He was going to discuss everything that happened in excruciating detail. He no longer cared to work there and had been on a clandestine mission. Via his LinkedIn contacts, he vowed to find a better position, or at least one without Patel. Matthew was talking to his mother one Saturday afternoon, very candidly. Mom, is it just me, or are there more and more people just sitting and zoning out these days? I see them in the parks, in the restaurants, and in their cars. They seem to be lost in a fog or speaking to people they cannot see. Though with all these apps out there, maybe they can see what other people are seeing as well as that person does himself. Emily realized that her son was speaking very frankly and cogently about this phenomenon. Maddie or Matthew, you know I see a lot of weird crap at the hospital. I can't really discuss it, or if I could, I make it a point not to bring the worst tales home. I want to keep home separate from what is going on there. Matt realized that his mother had never really spoken to him this way, truly as an adult. Mom, what are you getting at? Are you seeing similar behavior there on a regular basis? His mother launched right in. Yes, that is what I'm trying to say. You've done pretty well with that Augie or whatever they call it. You've kept your head. The problem, as with any mind altering influence, and this stuff can be very mind altering, is that one can go off the deep end unless you're truly centered. For some folks, I wonder if they can ever go back. You are the first person I am telling outside the hospital, but the number of surgeries to remove those implants is rising. You will soon be 18 years old with the say so over whether or not you wish to go forward with yours. I don't want to be accused of trying to influence you. That is definitely something to think about, Mom, said Matt. Maybe you are too close to the issue right now that you bring it up, but I'm really worried about Dad. He's starting to get that same 1,000-yard stare. That instantaneous look of both shock and recognition flashed over Emily's face. Matt had been right. This was possibly happening right under her roof, and she had missed it. Matt proceeded carefully. Mom, you know he's been spending a lot of time on LinkedIn, but also on Twitter, Instagram, and a few others. It looks like he's exploring the job market, but I think there's a lot more going on. Spending too much time on those platforms can really warp a person. One of my books talks about how Facebook and others actually admitted to hiring behavioral psychologists and folks expert in addictive behavior to help map out their algorithms. They weren't trying to squelch addiction, but strengthen it. They know so much about everyone on those platforms, it's not even close to funny. The so called conspiracy theorists go way deeper down that rabbit hole than I can imagine. But look how many debunked conspiracies turned out to be true. The media and these social networks are trying to control our thinking to cash in or keep the citizens passive. They also plant memes into social discourse to either gaslight us or to engineer some new normal. The implants just make it that much easier. I keep my location and plenty of other things turned off, or I opt out of all that stuff people ignore when they sign up. Emily and Matt then discussed Joshua's possible addiction. Matt said, when the device is inside a person's skull, there's little one can do other than observe behavior. They made a checklist of what they considered normal habits and how often the old Joshua would exhibit them. Emily said, this is cheap psychology, but it often works. As humans, we see patterns, and we also see when those patterns have been altered or disrupted. At the same time, the increased connectivity was a bit overwhelming for Joshua. Matt became concerned for his father. Dad, is there something bothering you these days? I thought everything was going nominally well at work. The inquest is still a month away, so you won't have to be in contact with Patel or some of the others that pushed your program before it was ready. It was difficult to even comprehend what his son, right in front of him, was saying. Inputs and alerts had been left open through several channels for the possibility of a viable job opening. Joshua had also opened channels to several outlets in order to deal with his grief and misguided guilt. On top of that, he had begun day trading more heavily in an effort to build up some cash in case he were dismissed from his job and could not find work right away. Matthew would need help with college soon, as would his sisters in just a few years. Unless he turned off his Augie or blocks more input, Starlink would funnel new information to his implant faster than he could address it all. There was only so much storage and processing power to deal with it. Matthew noticed the look of incomprehension on his father's face, but only for a moment, before he recovered himself. I'm sorry, Matt. Could you repeat that? I have a lot on my mind right now, and I don't think I caught what you were saying. Matthew reached out and grabbed Joshua by his upper arms. Dad, you may have just given yourself away. Just how much do you have on your mind these days? Have you checked your task manager lately? What percentage of your CPU cores are occupied at any given time? How much RAM are you using? And more importantly, do you have enough? Do you have a memory leak? Subconsciously, Joshua must have been reaching out for help because the next thing Matt heard was the sound of the printer in the study whirring away. Each sheet of paper rapidly filled with ink before falling off the edge of the shelf. Matthew spied his sister Beth earlier and yelled, Beth, can you bring me the papers that are printing out right now? It's really important. I think they're from Dad. Beth stopped what she was doing and ran to the study. Down on her knees, she began scooping up each sheet of paper while trying to put them into some kind of order. Each one had dates, times, and graphs on them, but she didn't have the bandwidth to look at them. Matt would know better what they meant. She had them mostly organized by the time she delivered them to her brother. When she found the two of them, she was immediately scared. What's wrong with Dad? He doesn't look good. Is he having a heart attack? I don't think so, Beth. His pulse is slowed, but it's not erratic. I believe he's just rebooting his Augie. There was probably some kind of overload and shutdown. These printouts are showing that he's been maxing out for weeks on memory and CPU usage, and even the processor temperatures are up despite the diamond substrate and the external heat sinking. Beth went to feel her father's head. He was definitely warm. She left to get some cold sponges and compresses to bring his temperature down. Dad, are you all right? Matthew asked. Joshua's eyes were open and he was looking around. Oh, hello, Matt. When did you get here? He asked. Matthew used his Augie to phone his mother at the hospital. Mom, can you come home? I think we may have found out why Dad has been acting so distant and odd. Is it an emergency? I'm pretty sure the emergency has passed. He had some kind of episode, but it seems to be over. Don't alert anyone, but you need to come home straight away or to take a look at him. Okay? We don't want anyone interfering to trying to cover things up. Emily had gained such confidence and increased respect for her son that she followed his advice to the letter. He really is a very reasoned, calm, and cool young man, she said to herself. He has an excellent grasp of both the technological and the human side of things. Joshua Fielding had quite a few personal days built up with his employer, so he took some time, much needed time off. He was still in grief over his friend and company test pilot, Johnny Ferreira. He was recovering from his hardware/software/bioware meltdown, though no one other than a couple of trusted doctors and professors knew about it outside of the family. The doctors bypassed the draconian and Byzantine government reporting of all medical procedures. There was the inquest to prepare for, as well as some much valued time with his family. Emily said, Matt, I feel so much better about your dad these days. He looks and acts more like his old self, even with that damn thing inside his head. No offense. When it came time for the inquest, all of the Fieldings were ready, and all were in attendance. This was a fact-finding process to explore the causes for the hyperliner breakup in which a veteran test pilot had been killed. This is not to say that even in such hearings that certain people are not essentially put on trial. Everyone has their own interest to protect or their own axe to grind. The National Transportation and Safety Board, NTSB, panel had finished with the upper management of Cloudskipper Aerospace, Inc., including Joshua's boss, Patel. The telemetry had gone over ad nauseum by several experts, as well as the radio traffic between Johnny and ground control. Joshua was accompanied by a trusted lawyer, if those words can be used together in a sentence, and friend for this event. Attorney Evan Jasper had a feel for such hearings and sometimes they turn into dog and pony shows for the government rather than honest fact-finding missions. Evan Jaspar Esquire asked Patel, "Is it true that several times Mr. Fielding came to you regarding the concerns of Johnny Ferreira, along with those of other pilots?" Patel's response was measured but confident. "I believe there were such occasions, yes. I considered each one and then decided what was best for the program as a whole." Joshua's friend continued, "So, Mr. Patel, did you never bow to the concerns of the test pilots? You know, of course, that they have the final say over each flight. Assuming their concerns are legitimate, is that not so?" Patel was getting annoyed. These men and women are fire-eating and hard-charging. It comes from their military background and flight experience. They know the risks, and they are there to push the envelope. I know it sounds cliche, but there it is. The litigator changed tack. "Let's go over your own background, Mr. Patel, shall we? You graduated near the top of your class at MIT. You too were a hard charger, as you described the pilots. MIT is a highly competitive environment, as is Cloud Skipper Aerospace, or have I been misinformed? You yourself seem to be on the fast track at your company, even jumping ahead of Mr. Fielding here, who leads you by several years." The appeal to Patel's ego seemed to have worked. "Yes, counselor, I have done quite well for myself, I have to admit. In my own way, I feel that I have the same strong sense of duty and personal pride that these test pilots possess. I've never been shot at, but the drive is there." The opening was there, so Jasper took it. "Mr. Patel, was it this strong sense of duty that you manipulated to keep the pilots moving ahead with the program, despite their concerns? They have the authority to stop a test flight, yet they never did." Patel's face flushed red for a moment. "I did no such thing. You are twisting my words. Those pilots know what is at stake for the program, for themselves, and for the future of aviation. They bit the bullet and did their jobs according to the terms they signed up for." The lawyer smelled blood and pressed harder. "Mr. Patel, you have used an interesting choice of words in your testimony. According to Mr. Fielding, who has corroborated testimony, you were writing your own software for your own neural enhancement chips. Do you admit that you did so? And if so, why would you do that?" Again, Patel's pride had been puffed up as his ego was once again stroked in public. "It is true. I did indeed work on my own software for my own needs and those of the Hyperliner program. This chip is mine, and this brain is mine, and the talent is mine. Not only am I an aeronautical engineer, but I fancy myself to be quite an accomplished programmer. I believe my hard work got me my promotion over Fielding there." "I see," said Patel's interrogator. "Are you a man who cuts corners, or are you a by-the-book man, Mr. Patel? Was that extraneous equipment in the cockpit by the book, or was programming your own Augie by the book?" Patel said with confidence, "As program manager, I'm authorized to bypass certain procedures to accelerate the program. Cloud Skipper prides itself on a robust and rigid set of safety standards, as well as engineering excellence. At the same time, we also know that not every T must be crossed nor I dotted. If such methods were always followed, then Lockheed's Skunk Works never would have been as successful as it was." Jasper then said, "Mr. Patel, I will stipulate that you likely are one hell of an engineer and one hell of a programmer, but are you also a lawyer?" The smile disappeared from Patel's face. "No, sir, I am not a lawyer." The litigator then asked, "Do you, sir, meticulously read all written agreements put before you before proceeding?" "I do my very best," came Patel's reply. Joshua's friend then asked, "Did you read the agreements provided to you before having your own neural augmentation surgery?" Patel wondered where this was going. "I believe I read it and understood it, yes. I was undergoing an operation and wanted to know what they were implanting in my head." Jasper then rounded second, heading for home. According to your own resume, Mr. Patel, you are the proud owner-operator of Apple's eye enhancer interface and processor. The terms of service for this device are very clear. There is to be no loading of unauthorized software into this device, especially that which has not received approval from Apple or the FDA. Doing so avoids all ongoing services from Apple, including upgrades or any downloads from the Apple Store. It also releases Apple from any and all liability traced to subsequent malfunction of the device or due to interference of outside algorithms. Furthermore, it appears that you misrepresented your software as legitimate in offering it to several people in your department, including Mr. Fielding there. As a programmer, Mr. Patel, do you know what a memory leak is or an infinite loop? Your software appears to have both of these defects. For an implant, this is extremely dangerous. Patel began to feel sick to his stomach. He took a drink of water. I don't believe I wish to answer any more questions in this forum without the aid and benefit of a lawyer. Patel's lawyer was looking everywhere around the chamber, but at his client.